The planets of the solar system certainly have mutual influence on each other. Therefore, the whole universe is one tightly tied bundle of processes. There is nothing accidental, incidental, or unimportant in this process. It is a complete integration of purposes. Now, for man, what is the purpose? Why is he settled here? Why is he in the problems he's in today? And why are these problems being pressed upon him to the point of his final solution of them? The answer is that man is here, like everything else in the universe, to grow. There is a purpose for him. The life of man is not merely a brief interlude between the cradle and the grave. The individual, by being born, living, and finally casting off this body, is not merely an accident of nature. It is not simply something that happens. And this is equally true when you study the cross-section of the eye of a fly. A magnificent mathematical pattern. That pattern is not an accident. Procreation is not an accident. Growth, maturity, the release of all kinds of attitudes and processes in our own thinking, these are not all accidents. The main problem, the greatest cause of accidents probably that we have, is that we have been gradually trained to ignore the testimonies that would lead us in the direction of truth. We are trained to be materialistic. If we do not believe that life is a vast futility, we are out of harmony with contemporary thinking. All other idealists are therefore merely dreamers, hoping, fearing, wondering. But the facts are that the physical universe alone is real. This is no longer tenable. We can't do it and face the national problems we have. We cannot understand the reason for ourselves until we discover that there is a reason for everything. We cannot solve the problems of government until we fit them into the great septenary pattern of existence. The final 7 laws that govern life must be adapted to the 7 rules which govern a nation or a community or finally the individual himself. All these things are part of an inflexible design. To ignore it is simply to suffer. It could give us answers, but if we do not search for those answers, we are simply victims of what we like to call accidents. There are no accidents. Everything has some reason for it. Something has happened to make it necessary. Now this is what the ancient Hindus call the wheel of necessity, that we are all on a cyclic pattern of needs, of things we have to learn and things we have to do. And there is no graduation from this school until we do what we ought to do and find out the answers to the things that we must know. Otherwise, we are always going to fall short of that which is necessary to release us from the painful cycle of necessity. Necessity has only one solution, one remedy, and that is to accomplish that which is necessary. Once we keep packed with necessity, all other things will come into order. Now today in world affairs there are necessities. These we are carefully ignoring because they interfere with our personal objectives. And yet we are going along breaking rules and suffering and blaming it all upon the fact that there are no rules, that everything is just a long trail of accidents, and that we will sometime join the past with its 7,000 years. Actually, we have to begin to think of a lawful universe. Now, if a lawful universe exists, its laws must be susceptible of discovery. It must be possible to solve things if the universe has patterns that require solution and demand solution. Nothing is impossible as long as we become aware of what we are trying to accomplish. And if we accomplish correctly, a great many of our problems become minimal. And most of the things we worry about today, crime, poverty, narcotics addiction, alcoholism, all these things, will cease if the individual becomes aware of the rules of life. Now, of course, we make laws physically to inhibit crime, to limit or restrict disasters and disorders. But these laws are not laws we love. They do not arise from realities. They arise from legislation and are frequently modified to the benefit of the executives. We are not actually ruled by laws that are primarily solutional to our need. We are following laws that legislators hope will help us to keep the peace without understanding why there is no peace and will not be until things change and become lawful. Now the ancients left us a great diagram of lawfulness. They gave us a wonderful hint. Lord Bacon advanced this, that by assuming definitely that there was a universal intelligence at the source of all things, yet he held some reputation as a scientist, and he proved conclusively that an individual could work definitely and deeply with physics, mathematics, chemistry, and other sciences, and still be a good child of the Church of England. The actual answers that we need do not interfere with our effectiveness. They simply make this effectiveness real and permanent. They contribute to the solution of things for which we are all seeking some kind of useful answers. So here we are with a universe so built that it is capable of being understood. And we are here to make what some of the ancient peoples called a pilgrimage. Now the pilgrimage is an ascent through the rungs of the ladder. A pilgrimage is a pattern of growth. It is a pattern of realities. And in Japan and China, the Buddhists make pilgrimages. These pilgrimages are for refreshment, and they are journeys from one sacred place to another, with the understanding that through the inward contemplation of the journey, the individual becomes aware of the eternal journey within himself, which must finally bring him home. As we find also in Homer's definition of the journeys of Ulysses, where he says the great hero of Troy set sail again for his own far distant native land. Well, this far distant native land is in a sense the new world, a new world of peace and order and integrities, based upon a fact that there are reasons that we are not required to do what other things do, because we can see what they do, but we cannot see what we do. We are not expected to take everything on credit. In fact, I think the scientist is more gullible in these respects than the average theologian. The scientist believes anything that another scientist says, whereas the theologian believes only the sayings of his own theology. So he doubts something. But the more conservative attitude at the moment is to try to break through to something. Now, in the midst of all of these problems, whether it be now or 5,000 years ago, we see the similar phenomena occurring. Out of the crisis, out of the strife, out of the stress, the pain, the suffering, the war, the pillage, the massacre, the tyrannies, all out of all of these things comes a kind of longing, a yearning in the human heart for peace, a great desire to understand why we are suffering, and to find some way of curing this suffering. But up to now, we haven't realized that we have the suffering, and the cure is limited to the same level as the suffering. We have the chart by which we know we suffer, but the chart of remedies is based upon the same chronology. We are working on one level to have the problem and cure it at the same time. Now, in the old ways of thinking, you couldn't do it that way. The old way was, if you have a problem on a level, you must cure it by going to one level above it. You must outgrow something to escape the consequences of your own mistakes. You cannot simply ask the government to pass another rule to supply more food for the homeless. This is all very important physically, but it's still physical. and it will never solve the soul problem. There will always be hunger until we find the cause of it and not merely try to feed the hungry. We have to know the reasons for these things. We have to know that our dilemmas result from our own abuses, our abuses of knowledge, abuses of skill. Science in some cases has actually given us the knowledge we need, but we even abuse that knowledge. We are unwilling to recognize the larger picture, the larger destiny of things. And because of this restriction and limitation, evils go uncorrected generation after generation, and war follows war in painful frequencies. But actually we are the masters of these things. We make them. We cause them. But we do not know how to cure them. Now it may well be also that in a time of this kind, that the new rising mind of the public is going to begin to investigate. In the last, I would say, 5 or 10 years, the interest in transphysical things has increased 100-fold. In every community there are now persons questioning the mistakes that are being made, and also seeking desperately to find an answer, and finding that this answer cannot be found by increasing the police force or getting more firemen or by creating some type of refuge for the hungry. These things may be necessary, but they must be outgrown in favor of something that is permanent, real, and inevitable. So out of the great diagram of the ancients, of the perfectly ordered universe, with its septenary ladder, with all of its hierarchies and orders, a world of mysteries as set forth in such great dramas as Dante's Inferno, Milton's Paradise Lost, and Gatto's Faust. These are all archetypal dramas, playing to the factors that are behind the mortal way of doing things. They tell us of a universe of causes. Now we may not want to feel or believe that somewhere up in the sky there is a world like the one described by John in the Apocalypse. We may not want to see a throne in front of this crystal sea with 24 elders bowing before it. But there again we're in trouble for a very simple reason. Those are symbols, not the reality. They are keys. The designs, the scenes, the situations represented in the spheres of redemption are not to be taken physically and literally. You cannot make a physical literalism out of a spiritual fact. They have to be understood intuitively, mystically, apperceptively. They are symbols to be interpreted, not scenic patterns to be copied. Just as these various moral fables are played out in cosmic mysteries, so the individual is expected to have the insight to realize that they are all parts of his own nature, which he is seeking to develop, and of limitations which he is seeking to overcome. So we get gradually to one concept which I think is very important basically, and that is that there is a pattern, that this pattern is unchanging, that this pattern will not know the 20th century from the 50th. This pattern is the same group of rules. As individuals evolve, they will move from one level of these rules to another. But no individual will ever be allowed to function indefinitely in variance with rules. He has to finally accept them. And by accepting them, vanquish them. By overcoming them, perfecting himself by means of these rules. Now, those of you who have ever been in a Muslim mosque will realize that in the courtyard of the mosque there is always a pool of water. This pool of water, like the Jewish mystery of the bowl on the shoulders of the 12 oxen, this bowl, or this pond, is a symbol of purification, with purification. The highest physical aspect of existence is the purification of physical life. Purification means the removal from that life of everything that is contrary to life, and anything that is a cause of death, sickness, or destruction. The to cleanse means to outgrow those defects which impair the person and endanger his world.